Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
And once again, this is your co-host Rich Gear, along with Doug, and kind of excited about tonight's topic. And it's one of those things we haven't really talked about for quite a little while. So it's about kind of the fine tuning of the solar system, right, Doug?
Yeah, young solar system and why that is
Yep.
important to creationists. And so we have a lot of different evidences in our solar system that indicate that our planets are young. And so we're going to discuss some of them and some of the things that were predicted by creationists years ago. And they did uh, come true when the evidence was actually observed by the Voyager spacecraft.
Yeah,
And
one of those things you want to talk about is like the magnetic fields and the different planets in the solar system, and that was predicted by what Dr. Russ Humphreys, things of his predictions. Is that what we might talk about a little bit?
yes, we're going to talk a little bit about his
Yeah.
questions. That whole saga started, back in the early 70s when Dr. Thomas Barnes proposed that the Earth's magnetic field was decaying, and that was it really showed that the Earth was young because if you extrapolated it back into time beyond maybe 10,000 years, you would have something a magnetic situation on the Earth that was would have been so powerful that it wouldn't have been possible. It would have
Didn't
been
they
like
say it would have been
a
the
star.
magnetic field of a star?
Yeah, it would be something
Basically.
really strong, and so in order for and the decay, I guess, is a linear decay, and this is from observations taken back in the 1800s to the present, and so the decay of the magnetic field is quite significant. And what it is also very significant is that it's consistent with a creation of about 6,000 years ago. And so it's a prediction of the biblical creation story where you have done your timeline going back from Jesus back to Adam. You trace the timeline of the Old Testament so that there is a consistent time for each person to be born, to give birth to their son, and then to die. And those dates are very consistent in the Bible. And what this then does verify these particular dates. Now, what Dr. Humphrey's theory was all about, and I've actually got his article here. He actually wrote two articles, one in 1983 and one in 1984. The first one was the creation of the Earth's magnetic field,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
it talked about it's what makes compass needles point north. And he in that earlier paper he showed how God could have started the Earth's field in a very simple way by using the magnetic fields of spinning atomic nuclei, and he could have created the Earth's original atomic nuclei with the spins all pointing in the same direction. And that would have given the magnetic field. And that's what you have with a magnet right now, is that all the molecules are actually pointing in the same direction. And
And now they're not.
well,
Now they're
what happens is that over time it decays because something might knock the molecules out of their original positions.
Let me ask you a question, Doug, about that, the decay of it. Does this have anything, do you think, to do with perhaps the fall of man? I'm not saying that there weren't things that already existed, but I always feel like the garden was a story, a true history, but there was a regenerative process that seemed to happen. The immortality was not, at that time, it seems to me, based merely on a static or a stasis type of idea. In other words, they had to eat from the tree of life. You know what I'm saying? Did things maybe would they have run down, but God Himself would perpetually sustain things? And this is speculative, I understand, but what's your thoughts about this? But maybe he's basically lifted his hands off of what would be considered a decay, because the magnetic field protects us from cosmic rays and other damaging things, does it not, or not?
That is indeed true, and this was all part of some speculations on early creationists, also with the water vapor canopy that was around the Earth, and some creationists believe that the collapse of that water vapor canopy caused Noah's flood. That particular idea is fallen out of favor with creationists, and so now we have, and we also know that God's sustaining power with bringing life into this earth is He has an active hand in keeping us alive and keeping us healthy and otherwise
Even in this fallen world, Doug, we see His sustaining hand, but it's not in perpetuity, or not for like immortal sakes. It's been, that's why death comes in, why death has been involved in it, why things decay. So we talked. I think you and I have talked like things like the second law of thermodynamics, where things are running down. But we wonder if the Lord Himself sustained, not only merely sustained it, but renewed it. It's kind of like there's a spiritual component here. It says, be not conformed to the image of this world, but transformed by the renewing of your mind. And why do we eat food? It renews our body. Why do we sleep? It renews our. There's a sense of, in God's economy, about renewing rather than just stasis. There's a constant renewal that goes on, and that was removed at the fall. And I'm wondering if that affected. We can only speculate, of course, because none of us were there. But I wonder if it has any kind of scientific or empirical ability to kind of maybe say this is a reasonable extrapolation. These are things my brain always goes to, things like that, because I'm always curious, because I know the second law had to be in operation before the fall. It's not like we didn't think the second law was in operation, but there was a sustaining principle that was removed, it seems to me. And I think the same thing about the magnetic field. I wonder.
well, the decay of the magnetic field really doesn't have anything to do with the second law of thermodynamics.
I understand that. I wasn't trying to say that. I'm just trying to make a corollary that has a renewal process. And as the magnetic field, does that have a renewal? In other words, like we see a linear decay rate now since the fall, but before the fall, would been maintained by a renewing sense? I'm just wondering about those kinds of things.
Well,
It
the
doesn't
Bible
really
doesn't
affect what
tell
you're
us,
talking about.
so that's pure speculation, which
It is,
really
but it's
doesn't
fun to
work.
speculate stuff like that. What the world would be like without a fall.
Right.
Because a lot of people, old earthers, think everything remains the same today as it was in the past, and things changed at the fall. A lot of things changed. I'm just curious, could this be one thing that maybe also changed at the fall? And just curious.
Yeah, what will have to remain would be what remains of the magnetic field is what was there in the beginning, and it's
Yes.
the magnetic uh, molecules in the Earth that are still spinning all in the same direction, and that is what we have with the why we have a magnetic field is that it just continues from what it was in the beginning. It's just that it's becoming obvious that it isn't going to last, and that's going to be a question. Well, if it doesn't last, then what will be the effect of that? Now, what Humphreys did, was he said, well, this data, because based upon the Earth's original creation, this mass and the size and a 6,000 year timeline, the data fits the model. So the question is, you can verify the model a little bit if it also applies to other planetary magnetic fields.
I was going to ask you about that, because Mercury and Uranus, right? Both have been, haven't they been
Yeah, what
calculated or checked?
all of the well, except for Pluto, all the planetary magnetic fields have been measured.
Yes. Okay, all of them. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so what he did was he in this particular paper, which was published in 1984, he said, well, based upon the mass of the planet Jupiter, and Mars and Saturn, we know what those magnetic fields are because it's been measured, and so the question is, does it fit the model? And indeed, it does. For those,
So they've actually been able to calculate or measure the decay rates of these planets.
well, that's what happened when we sent the Voyager spacecraft up. At that time, Jupiter and Saturn was measured because the Voyager had passed by those two planets. But and then there was also a probe that went to Mercury, and another ones that went to Venus and Mars, and so we knew what those magnetic fields were. Now, there was a second probe that went to Mercury again, and Humphreys predicted that it would show a decay, and it was spot on for his prediction that particular magnetic field. And so it's pretty interesting that that data matches. The one good proof of a theory is if it works.
Well, those are I read that years ago. I think it was Walt Brown's thing was when I first ran into it. It's probably not unique to him, but you basically got explanation, prediction, and parsimony. Basically, you don't have to put up a bunch of ad hoc explanations after the fact proves what you theorized was wrong. In other words, that's parsimony. But prediction is obviously an explanation, and those three things. And Humphreys seems to be doing really, really well with that. Now, what I was getting at, what I'm curious that the other planets, they measured what the magnetic field was, but were they able to measure a rate of decay on any of those? Mercury, you said because they set a second probe up. Were the other
Right.
ones able to? How did they? How did
But
he come
what
up?
Humphreys predicted would be what the strength of the magnetic fields for Uranus and Neptune would be when the Voyager spacecraft flew by it in 1986 and 1989.
And I know that was accurate. Yeah.
And that was accurate. And it's like evolutionists wouldn't expect Mercury to even have a magnetic field.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's
Right.
too small. And I remember about that later on when after he had his predictions came out true, I asked him, well, what about the Galilean moons, Ganymede, Callisto, Io, and Europa? Do
Yeah.
they have magnetic fields? And would they fit your model? And he did a back of the envelope calculation, and indeed they did. And so, for even the moons of Jupiter to have magnetic fields indicates relative youth. Now, the moon Io is a special case also because of its all entirely volcanic nature. That they call it the pizza moon because of its many volcanoes going off all at once. You can actually see the explosions. It's really kind of amazing that it's that way, and so that really surprised evolutionists because they don't expect something millions of years old to continue to have volcanic activity. In fact, it's a problem even on the Earth, Well, they would expect after millions of years that volcanic activity to subside. And so
Right.
here's a case where the evolutionary model doesn't work, but the creationist model does work very well.
And of course, when they come up with these things, I remember reading about this from Humphreys and other things. The magnetic fields, for instance, they come up with ad hoc explanations after the fact to try to dumb their because they had their measurements of how strong it would be would be much less by way, what by I don't know whether quantum measurements, but a lot more. So what they propose oftentimes, I know with Earth, don't they propose like a dynamo thing where it goes down, then comes back up and down
Right.
again? But there's no evidence for that.
Well,
Is there?
Humphreys acknowledges that there were
Reversals.
magnetic reversals at the time of the flood because there is indications in the Earth's crust that there were magnetic reversals. But
But a reversal is
it's
not a
going
dynamo, is
from
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
the energy is the same as
Polarity,
switch.
right?
The switch's
Yeah.
polarity,
Yeah.
and so but all in all, the oscillations just continue to diminish
Decay, yeah.
over
That sounds
time.
almost like a pendulum, what you do. But Doug, that happens a lot in a lot of things. I don't know whether you want to get onto that or not, but we when we talk about comets, for instance, they have to propose an Oort cloud because comets shouldn't last as long as they do. If it's supposedly they're millions of years old, and they don't. How does that happen? They continue to come in orbit, and they're just basically an ice ball. Right? Is that what they are?
Right, and then they lose mass every
Every time they go in
movement
there.
of the sun, and we remember well Belial's comet. Um, it was observed to split in two on one revolution, and then the next time around, it just became a meteor shower, and so it broke completely up. And we've taken probes that gone to these the comets. There's I forget the name of the comet that they actually went to see, but it was and there was a lot of indications that these comets are quite young. And
Yes.
the proposal for comets is that they originate from outside the solar system. They get perturbed by two different a planetary body and the sun, and so then they end up in a parabolic orbit around the sun. They also, the same force would fling them out of the solar system too,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
so you might have them make several revolutions, but they figured that Halley's comet, the most famous one, was perturbed by Neptune because its period is 76 years, and so it came in 1910, and it also came in 1986.
86, yeah.
Now it's interesting that my grandmother, I asked her about this. She remembered the 1910 visit.
Yeah, because didn't it come really, really close to Earth? There was a lot of people had apocalyptic visions. I mean, I may be wrong here. My memory may be skewed, but I remember reading that the tail passed by it really close or something, and they
Yeah.
could see it really close.
And then the visit in 1986 wasn't spectacular at all because it actually was observed in the summer, the southern hemisphere. But
Yeah. It was
that
cool. I remember right near there was a hail bop or something. Was that the one you could
yeah,
actually
that was
see
one.
for several days? Yeah, that was neat.
Yeah, that was the one where you had a group called the Raelians appear.
Oh yeah, they were nuts.
And,
Yeah, I
and
know.
they were saying, there's aliens riding on this Hale-Bopp comet, and
Yeah.
it was really funny because their website rael.org was one letter away from mine, and I had gotten some real funny texts from some of their
Oh,
supporters.
really? I don't remember. Oh, yeah. I don't remember that. That's funny. That's hilarious.
So I had
But
to
that
put a little
there's go ahead. I'm
I had
sorry.
to put a little disclaimer on my website. These
Yeah,
guys are not us.
yeah. He's not
But
us. Yeah, yeah.
it's funny the kind of crazy stuff that's out there, and the problem is that how do you distinguish the stuff that really makes sense and is true from all the crazy stuff because there's so much of it. We get
There's
it
a lot of it. Well,
get
Doug,
it
even
in
the
every
idea. Go
aspect
ahead.
of we get it in every aspect of the uh, life, and the medicine and the science and the technology. How do you distinguish the truth from what is false? And so
Well, to me, I start with the biblical text, which has proven itself over thousands of years, and it's reliable and consistent, but it doesn't touch on a lot of the nuts and bolts issues that you have to deal with as human beings. Some of the specifics in medicine, the idea, but it does deal with the idea that, oh, for instance, I'll give an example. This is just way off a little far field, but he made them male and female. There aren't 57 genders or sexes. There's only two. Okay. I start with the biblical text there. Okay. That keeps me on track. And there's a lot of things like that in scripture. Doug, some other things that are interesting. I don't know whether you had time to look this up. I was going to look up a little bit more closer. I've read over the years some of the fine tuning of like the moon and the sun. And you talk about the eclipse, the ability to do the eclipse, the perfect size of the moon and the sun. And where really, it's it's really strange how
well,
that
it's the only place in the known, in our known observed universe where this is possible, where you have the sun and the moon and the earth all appearing to be the same size in the heavens, and so it is possible for the shadow of the earth to cover the moon or the sun completely and perfectly in the exactly same size, so that now there's times where you have, if the Earth is perihelion, which is way out there, then or aphelion, I guess, is the other one where it's closer or farther away. You'll get an annular eclipse, which means you'll see a ring around the sun.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But for the most part, most solar eclipses are total, and just like the one we had just recently, where you can see the corona of the sun, and it's really pretty amazing what we learned about our solar system from because and then you have the tides of the moon causing the natural cycles here on the Earth that makes it possible for life to really thrive in this Earth. If we didn't have the moon, you wouldn't have, the oceans would be sort of still, and they wouldn't actually roil up all the ingredients for life. Just sit there and decay. But the tides really have a very beneficial effect on the. I remember Larry Perry and we went out to Joggins on the Bay of Fundy. And those tides were 50 feet. And, those waters are, wonderful fishing grounds, of course, but you can see where the River Hebert is backed up. It goes backwards.
Yes, I've seen that. I've been there to see that quite a while. It's quite a bit.
In St. John, there's what you call the reversing falls, and that's where there's a waterfall when the tide is going out, but when the tide is coming in, there's a tidal bore that goes up in the other way, and so these are indications that when God designed the earth and all the heavenly bodies, he did it for a purpose and for a reason. I wanted to mention one other thing, and that was Pluto. Now, it was only recently that we had the New Horizons spacecraft reach Pluto and document all the surface area of the planetoid Pluto, and it's all, the surface is like a sea, it's like it's flat, and you would expect if it was old that it would be pockmarked with craters.
Yeah, craters and things of that nature. Yeah. So it's like smooth.
It's smooth, yeah. There's a whole Valentine's shaped a patch on Pluto that is totally smooth. And same with his satellite Charon. And then there's like three other moons that it has rotating around it. So
But Pluto?
Pluto has five moons.
Really? And they downgraded it from a planet. That still irritates me.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the moon Charon is almost the same size as Pluto is, and so they sort of rotate around an ellipsoid axis.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And so it's quite interesting to see that. And so I had a article that I printed about Pluto, and it was pretty interesting that Pluto was just people were amazed how young it looked, and they have no explanation for it. Everything that we see in the planets in the solar system really cause more questions for evolutionists than they provide answers, and they would have never predicted to find something so young like that.
Right.
Other
That's
moons
Pluto.
in the solar system, they're pockmarked with a lot of craters, like Mimas, Saturn's moon. That one looks like it was bombarded. But of course, you have in the Saturn system a lot of those particle things, asteroid-like meteorites that would have hit that because it's in that breakup of and with the rings,
Yep.
And so one thing I did ask Henny Remoten, my friend, he has a program that predicts the orbital of all the orbitals of all the planets. And so he noticed that as he projected it out in the future, the whole system wobbles like this.
Is that right? Well, okay.
But I asked him, well, what would happen if you reversed this back 6,000 years? He could predict what those planets had done. Would there be a spot 6,000 years ago precisely where they would have all lined up at the time of creation?
Oh, that's interesting.
So I was thinking, wow, that might be something that we can figure out and speculate as creationists.
So is he looking into that with his calculation?
He's going to see if he can figure that out and let me know if there's actually a pattern that would have been happening 6,000 years at the time of creation.
Wow. So stay tuned. We got some new stuff here. So Doug, we got a final few seconds. Any last thoughts about what we'd like to say, or?
Well, the solar system is young. We have other ideas about the actual universe, which is a topic for another show. But we hope you enjoyed our show. We will see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.